kusanyusa aboluganda okutula inematovu umanaimu shebeti achim gam yahadu inematovu umanaimu shebeti achim gam yahadu lava wekulyo kulungi lwekusanyusa aboluganda okutula lava wekulyo kulungi lwekusanyusa aboluganda okutula inematovu umanaimu shebeti achim gam yahadu inematovu umanaimu shebeti achim gam yahadu
Hashem lo yivne ba'is, shalom lo yivoyna boyim. Hashem lo yishmor yir, shav shokat shoymai. Hashem lo yivne ba'is, shalom lo yivoyna boyim. Hashem lo yishmor yir, shav shokat shoymai. Hashem lo yivne ba'is, shalom lo yivoyna boyim. Hashem lo yishmor yir, shav shokat shoymai. Hashem lo yivne ba'is, shalom lo boyna boyim. Hashem lo yishmor yir, shav shokat shoymai. Ine lo yonum velo yishon, lo yonum velo yishon, shoymai Yisroel. Ine lo yonum velo yishon, lo yonum velo yishon, shoymai Yisroel. Ine lo yonum velo yishon, lo yonum velo yishon, shoymai Yisroel. Ine lo yonum velo yishon, lo yonum velo yishon, shoymai Yisroel. Hashem lo yivne ba'is, shalom lo boyna boyim. Hashem lo yishmor yir, shav shokat shoymai. Hashem lo yivne ba'is, shalom lo boyna boyim. Hashem lo yishmor yir, shav shokat shoymai. Hashem lo yivne ba'is, shalom lo boyna boyim. Hashem lo yishmor yir, shav shokat shoymai. Hashem lo yivne ba'is, shalom lo boyna boyim. Hashem lo yishmor yir, shav shokat shoymai. Ine lo yonum velo yishon, lo yonum velo yishon, shoymai Yisroel. Ine lo yonum velo yishon, lo yonum velo yishon, shoymai Yisroel.
Kalam, ene shabati nakavera, lehadadi kirati kalam, ene shabati nakavera, shamuru vezakoru mediburi ehadi, ishimi anueli hami uhadi, Adonai ehadi, bushimo ehadi. Ishemi buri kipareti buri tuhiram, lehadodi kirati kalam, ene shabati nakaveram, lehadodi kirati kalam, ene shabati nakaveram, ikirati shabati lehubuni leha, ijimi gori haboraha, mirashimi kedemuna suha, sofa maase bemeha sofa tuhila, lehadodi kirati kalam, ene shabati katikala Pene Shabati nakavela Mikuna shimereha irumeruha Umize imitoha hafeha Rabura hashebeti baemendi habaha Behuya hamolu aleiha emilam Ehadodi ikiratikala Pene Shabati nakavela Ehadodi ikiratikala Pene Shabati nakavela Itinari mi afaru komi Livishi bigide iti farute haami Aruyadi beni shaireti harahami Kalubaeri nafushigala Ehadodi likiratikala Pene Shabati nakavela Ehadodi likiratikala Pene Shabati nakavela Iti urari Kibo ureha uri shiru daberi Kabodi Adonai alaiha nigala Ehadodi likiratikala Pene Shabati nakavela Lehadodi likiratikala Pene Shabati nakavela
אדוני עולמו אשר הוא מלכם בטרם וקולו יסירו נברא ליצי נעשה ביפזו אזי מלך שמעון נקרא ואחרי כי הלתי הכל לבדו ימלאו הנרא והוא היה והוא הווה והוא יהיה בתפארה והוא אחד ונשנים והמכשיר לו לא הנברא בירי ראשי בירי תחרסין ולא הוזי והמסירה והוא אלי והיגואלי וסורי הברי בעצי זורה והוא ניסי ומנוסי מנוסי כוסי ביום אחד בידו אף הידורוני בעצי אישן ואילה ואימורוכי גביעתי אדוני לי אדוני לי אדוני לי ולעילה
Nigen wie a Sod, wo's David hat gespielt vor Gott, nur dir wo's nicht gewähn, als a Yeshua. Und me singt a Zoi, a Fa, a Sol, a Mische Berg hebt a Kol, der Duller Melech webt a Halleluja. Deine Munde ist geworden schwach, בשבע בוט sich auf und Dach ihr Gein, die Levone, dein Refuhr. Und sie nimmt dein Guff, sie nimmt dein Kopf, sie schneidet von deiner Haare Zop und zieht von Meul a Robe, Halleluja. Und heirig kennt dein Stil, ich bin geschlafen auf dein Biel, ich hab kein Mal nicht gelebt mit Ersatz nur. Nur ich seh dein Schloss, ich seh dein Form, ein Herz ist nicht kein Melchstrom, es ist ein kalte und ein kalte Halleluja. Wie einmal, das sag mir euch, was tut sich dort in dein Scheuß, du wusch darfst dich schämen wie a Psua.
Shachar avakesh chatzuri umizgabi eroch lefanecha shachri vegam arbi lifnei
So on page 1. Hineni. Here I am again, without much to offer by way of moral worth. I've a rich collection of defeats. Maybe that's to your liking. I don't know, do you? If I'm to be quite frank, your likes and dislikes have never been all that clear to me. Presumably, love is something you're in favor of, and I've found it possible to love, but never without a certain anguish. Whether that's the way you intended, or that's a problem all my own, I can't say. Can you? I've never wanted to pain others. I've never wanted to pain myself. I guess I can plead good intentions, but I needn't tell you about good intentions and the road to hell. I've often wondered, did you yourself intend that to live would be so complicated, to find a way in the world so hazardous? Did you have any idea at all that living would involve such confusion and such heartbreak? I can't be sure any of this will mean much to you. I can't even be sure that you exist as more than a figment of my own mysterious psyche. It's a risk to open up to you. Who knows? I may be branding myself a terrible fool, but what's not a risk? What's guaranteed to be foolproof? So Hineni, here I am again, praying for some modest bravery so that I can go on saying to you, here I am again.
אשרי יושבי ביתך, עוד יהללו חסלה. אשרי העם שככה לו, אשרי העם שאדוני אלוהיו תהילה לדוד. ממך אלוהי המלך, ואברכת שמך לעולם ועד. בכל יום אברכך, והללה שמך לעולם ועד. גדול אדוני ומהולל מאוד, ולגדולתו אין חקר. תולדו ישבח מעשיך, וגבורותיך יגידו. אשרי יושבי ביתך, עוד יהללו חסלה. אשרי העם שככה לו, אשרי העם שאדוני אלוהיו תהילה לדוד.
Let every living soul bless your name, eternal God, and let every human being acclaim your majesty forever and ever. Through all eternity, you alone are our sovereign God. God of all ages, of all creatures, of all generations, all praise to you. You guide the world with steadfast love, your creatures with tender mercy. You neither slumber nor sleep. You awaken the sleeping and rouse the dormant. You give speech to the silent, freedom to the enslaved, and justice to the oppressed. To you alone we give thanks.
Though our mouths should overflow with song as the sea, our tongues with melody as the roaring waves, our lips with praise as the heaven's wide expanse, and though our eyes were to shine as the sun and the moon, our arms extend like eagles' wings, our feet speed swiftly as deer. Still, we cannot fully thank you, our God and God of all ages, or bless your name enough for even one of your infinite kindnesses to our ancestors and to us.
Therefore, O God, limbs and tongue and heart and mind shall join to praise your name. Every tongue will yet affirm you, and every soul give you allegiance. As it is written, all my limbs shall say, who is like you, Eternal One? And David sang, bless the Eternal One, O my soul, and let all that is within me bless God's holy name.
Baruch hu et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, yotzer or uvorei choshech, oseh shalom uvorei et hakol. Maker of darkness and dawn, the God who opens the gates of mercy, who gives light to all who await forgiveness, be with us on this atonement day.
God of times and seasons, be with us this day.
God of hope and joy, be with us this day.
God of the loving heart, be with us this day.
Be with us as we look for strength to be free, freedom to struggle against those who worship power, and power to resist all who would oppress us.
God of freedom and right, be with us this day. O one and only God, you've made each of us unique and formed us to be united in one family of life. Be with us, Eternal One, as we seek to unite our lives with your power and your love.
We proclaim now your oneness and our own hope for unity. We acclaim your creative power in the universe and in ourselves, the law that binds world to world and heart to heart.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto,
V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך. וקשרתם להיות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם. אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם. In this world waiting to be redeemed, our hearts cry out, cannot our dearest hopes at last come true? Many are our defeats, yet how many are deliverances? After servitude to Pharaoh, we choose service to God. After exile in Babylon, we rebuild God's shrine. Yesterday's wounds, so nearly fatal, begin to heal, and Israel, still living, plants new seeds of redemption.
Let the time come when all the peoples will be joined in bonds that cannot break. The nations will yet be at peace. The earth will yield good fruit. Mountains and waters will exult. Those who sowed in tears will reap in joy, and all will sing with one accord.
שיבחו גאולים לשמך על שפות הים, יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו אדוני
בעזרת ישראל ופדחנו ממך יהודה וישראל גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו קדוש ישראל ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
O Rock of Israel, come to Israel's help. Fulfill your promise of redemption for Judah and Israel. Our Redeemer is the God of hosts, the Holy One of Israel. Blessed is Adonai, the Redeemer of Israel.
Baruch Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avotenu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak Velohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Leah Elohei Rachel הגבור והנורא, אל עליון.
ומחסדים טובים,
וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות. ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. זוכרנו לחיים, מלכות בחיים, וכתבנו בספר החיים, למען אלוהים חיים. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני.
ברוך הוא וברוך שמו,
מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה.
אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיה הכל אתה רב להושיע, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיה הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה. מי כמוך אהב הרחמים, זוכר יצוריו לחיים ברחמים, ונאמן אתה לחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיה הכל.
Your might, O God, is everlasting.
Help us to use our strength for good and not for evil.
You are the source of life and blessing.
Help us to choose life for ourselves and our children.
You are the support of the falling.
Help us to lift up the fallen.
You are the author of freedom.
Help us to set free the captive.
You are our hope in death as in life.
Help us to keep faith with those who sleep in the dust.
Your might, O God, is everlasting.
Help us to use our strength for good. Unatana Tokef. Let us proclaim the sacred power of this day. It is awesome and full of dread. For on this day your dominion is exalted, your throne established in steadfast love. There in truth you reign. In truth you are judge and arbiter, counsel and witness. You write and you seal. You record and account. You remember deeds long forgotten. You open the book of our days, and what is written there proclaims itself, for it bears the signature of every human being.
The great shofar is sounded, the still small voice is heard. The angels, gripped by fear and trembling, declare in awe, "This is the day of judgment." For even the host of heavens are judged, as all who dwell on earth stand arrayed before you.
As the shepherd seeks out the flock and makes the sheep pass under the staff, so do you muster and number and consider every soul, setting the bounds of every creature's life and decreeing its destiny.
יחתבון, וביום צום כיפור יחתמון, כמה יעברון וכמה יבראון.
ראש השנה יקטבון, וביום צום כיפור, וביום צום כיפור יקטבון. ראש השנה יקטבון, וביום צום כיפור, וביום צום כיפור יקטבון.
מי יחיה ומי ימות.
Mi vekitsor, mi lo vekitsor, mi vomayim, mi voesh.
Mi vacherev umi vachaya, mi varav umi vatzama, mi varash umi vamagefa, mi vachanika umi viskila. Rosh Hashanah יקטבון, וביום צום כיפור, וביום צום כיפור יקטבון. ראש השנה יקטבון, וביום צום כיפור, וביום צום כיפור יקטבון.
Mi yanuach, mi yanuach, mi shaker, mi yitaref.
מי ישלב ומי ישייסר, מי יעני ומי יאשר, מי שפל ומי ירום.
On Rosh Hashanah it is written, on Yom Kippur it is sealed. How many shall pass on, and how many shall come to be? Who shall live, and who shall die? Who shall see ripe age, and who shall not? Who shall perish by fire, and who by water? Who by sword, and who by beast? Who by hunger, and who by thirst? Who by earthquake, and who by plague? Who by strangling, and who by stoning? Who shall be secure, and who shall be driven? Who shall be tranquil, and who shall be troubled? Who shall be poor, and who shall be rich? Who shall be humbled, and who exalted? But repentance, prayer, and tzedakah temper judgment's severe decree.
Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh Adonai Tzvaot,
בכל הארץ כבודו. אדיר אדירנו, אדוני אדוננו, מהדיר שמך בכל הארץ.
Baruch kevod Adonai mimekomo.
אחד הוא אלוהינו, הוא אבינו, הוא מלכנו, הוא מושיענו. והוא ישמיענו ברחמיו לעיני כל חי.
ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהי ציון, לדור ודור, לדור ודור.
הללויה, הללויה,
הללויה. הללויה, הללויה.
To all generations, we will make known your greatness, and to all eternity proclaim your holiness. Your praise, O God, shall never depart from our lips. Blessed is the Eternal One who rules in holiness. You are with us in our prayer and our love and our doubt, in our longing to feel your presence and to do your will. You are the still, clear voice within us. Therefore, O God, when doubt troubles us, when anxiety makes us tremble and pain clouds the mind, we look inward for the answer to our prayers. There may we find you, and there find courage and endurance. And let our worship bring us closer to one another, that all Israel and all who seek you may find new strength for your service.
שים
Shalom, Tova, Uvracha. Sim Shalom, Tova, Uvracha. Sim Shalom, Tova, uvracha. Sim Shalom, Tova, uvracha. Chen v'chesed, chen v'chesed v'rachamim. Chen v'chesed, chen v'chesed v'rachamim, v'rachamim.
שים
Shalom, Tova, uvracha. Sim Shalom, Tova, uvracha.
שים
Shalom, Tova, uvracha. Sim Shalom, Tova, uvracha.
Peace and happiness, blessing, grace, love, and mercy. May these descend on all Israel and all the world. Bless us, God, one and all, with the light of your presence, for in the light of your presence we find the fullness of life, faithful love and charity, compassion, blessing, and peace. Help us, O God of peace, by our deeds to inscribe ourselves in the book of life and blessing, righteousness and peace. Praise be the one who teaches Israel and all peoples to love and pursue peace, and to bring it to all the earth.
Shana Tova Tikatevu. This is Michael Rosen, and greetings from the Ipanema neighborhood of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, where my wife Vivian Manasseh and I are celebrating the High Holy Days this year. I'm honored that Rabbi Bruce asked me for some personal reflections, so I thought I would talk about Jewish life in South America, and specifically Brazil. I'm standing in front of the oldest synagogue in the Americas in Recife, Brazil, but more on this later. As some of you know, Vivian is Brazilian, daughter of Holocaust survivors of Berlin, Germany. Vivian's parents escaped Germany in 1938 and 1939. Both families ended up in La Paz, Bolivia. You may have all heard or seen the story of Schindler's List. Well, at that time, there was an Austrian Jew, Moritz Hochschild, who became a tin baron in Bolivia and actually saved more than 10 times the number of Jews that Schindler saved. And some 10,000 Jews who came to Bolivia, a landlocked mountainous country in South America, depleted of its men folks due to wars with neighboring countries. La Paz, the main city, is over 13,000 feet above sea level. Hochschild not only provided passage into Bolivia, but also documentation and helped Jewish families get settled with jobs, citizenship, and passports. Vivian's parents and grandparents met in La Paz and years later got married. Bolivia is one of the poorest countries in Latin America and was rocked for years by rapid changes of government, coups d'etats, and economic mismanagement. Life at over 13,000 feet above sea level was not easy. Well, part of the family stayed in La Paz, carving out a Jewish life. Both sets of grandparents and her parents were, after a number of years, able to emigrate in the 1950s with difficulty to Brazil, landing in Rio de Janeiro, the capital. Vivian was born in Rio, and her parents became involved in the Jewish community, supporting one of the principal synagogues where Vivian became a bat mitzvah. Judaism in Brazil has a long history, in fact, predating U.S. Jewish history due to Dutch Jews, originally the survivors of the Spanish-Portuguese Inquisition, which immigrated in the late 15th century to the Netherlands. Both the Dutch and the Portuguese colonized different parts of Brazil in the early 1500s, with the Dutch colonizing the important northeastern port city of Recife. Portuguese Dutch Jews in Recife created the first synagogue in the Americas around 1636, the Kahal Zur Israel synagogue, which I'm standing in front of, which still exists today and has been restored as a museum. And the Jewish community in Recife there numbered some 1,450 Sephardic Jews. When the Portuguese retook control of the Dutch colony of Recife in 1654, 23 Dutch Jews, fearing the Inquisition, escaped to New Amsterdam. the Dutch colony in North America, which would later become New York City. The Dutch also established other South American colonies, including in Curacao and Suriname, which had significant Jewish populations. And the second oldest synagogue in the Americas was established in Curacao in 1651. All of these Dutch Jewish populations in South America later had impact on Jewish population in New York and Rhode Island, where the first synagogue, the Torah synagogue, was formed in Newport. So what is Jewish life today in Brazil? It is estimated that Brazil has some 120,000 Jews today out of a total population of 210 million. Certainly smaller than Chicago's Jewish population of close to 300,000, and smaller than Argentina's estimated 230,000 Jews. Interestingly, many of the rabbis in Brazil come from Argentina, as there is a shortage of Brazilian rabbis. The three largest Jewish populations in Brazil are in São Paulo with about 75,000 Jews, Rio de Janeiro with 30,000, and Porto Alegre with about 15,000. And about 75% of Brazilian Jews are of Ashkenazi descent, with the remaining 25% Sephardic. Due to the much smaller impact of the Jewish population in Brazil, most Brazilians have little idea of Judaism, Jewish culture, and Jewish holidays, including the holidays. In fact, the fastest growing religion today in Brazil is evangelism, representing about 35% of the population. Most Jewish communities in Brazil are very tight-knit and revolve around Jewish schools, synagogues, and social clubs. Jewish children early on participate in a more rigorous academic program, learning both Hebrew, written and spoken, and English, in addition to the native Portuguese. In other words, trilingual from an early age. Unlike the US, where families migrate continuously, Jewish Brazilians tend to stay in their same neighborhood for generations, attending the same institutions as their family members. With the rise in global anti-Semitism, Brazil strictly condemns anti-Semitism, and such an act is an explicit violation of Brazilian law. And according to the Brazilian Penal Code, it is illegal to write, edit, publish, or sell literature that promotes anti-Semitism or racism. The law provides penalties of up to 5 years in prison for crimes of racism or religious intolerance, and enables courts to fine or imprison for 2 to 5 years anyone who displays, distributes, or broadcasts anti-Semitic or racist material. The results of a global survey on anti-Semitic sentiments released by the Anti-Defamation League ranked Brazil among the least anti-Semitic countries in the world and lowest in Latin America. Nevertheless, going to temple for Shabbat services on a Friday or Saturday usually entails a fairly high level of security, with external security guards on watch and people being screened before being allowed to go into at least and through 2 security doors. This is due to the residual impact from the 1990s throughout Latin America of the Palestinian terrorist support groups from Hezbollah and Iran, which bombed Jewish institutions in Argentina during the 1990s. Nevertheless, Brazilians today play an active role in Brazilian politics, sports, academia, trade, and industry, and are overall well integrated in all spheres of Brazilian life. The best hospital in Brazil and all of Latin America is the Jewish hospital Albert Einstein, and compares favorably with the best of US hospitals. Interestingly, the number 2 hospital in Brazil is the Syrian Lebanese hospital. Brazil's Arab population is about 11.6 million, or 6% of the total population. Surprisingly, Jews and Arabs in Israel get along without much friction. Due to the impact of COVID in Brazil, with about 21 million infected and 583,000 deaths, versus about 40 million infected in the US and 647,000 deaths, High Holy Day services this year will be virtual. Services that I have attended here in Brazil in the past are typically longer than US Reformed services, but share many similarities. And due to the small, close-knit Jewish community here, There's a great warmth spread by all attendees of these services. And although we both look forward to the days when we can once again share future High Holy Days with our Hakafa friends and fellow congregants, we would like to wish you all a sweet and healthy New Year, Gamar, Hatima, Tova, and looking forward to seeing you soon.
Our God, God of our mothers and fathers, grant that our prayers may reach you. Do not be deaf to our pleas, for we are not so arrogant and stiff-necked as to say before you, our God and God of all ages, we are perfect and have not sinned. Rather do we confess, we have gone astray, we have sinned, we have transgressed.
Ashamnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu, Dibarnu dofi, ay 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 Avinu, Vehirshanu, Zadnu, Chamasnu, Tafalnu sheker, ay 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 Ya'atnura, Gizavnu, Latnu, Maradnu, Niatnu, Sararnu, Avinu, Pashanu, Sararnu, Kishinu Horef, ay 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 Rashanu, Shichatnu, Tiavnu, Tainu, Titanu, ay 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 ay
We all have committed offenses. Together we confess these human sins.
The sins of arrogance, bigotry, and cynicism, of deceit and egotism, flattery and greed, injustice and jealousy.
Some of us kept grudges, were lustful, malicious, or narrow-minded.
Others were obstinate or possessive, quarrelsome, rancorous, or selfish.
There was violence, weakness of will, xenophobia.
We yielded to temptation and showed zeal for bad causes.
Now may it be your will, O God of all generations, to pardon all our sins, to forgive all our wrongdoings, and to blot out all our transgressions.
Page 13. We sin against you when we sin against ourselves.
For our failures of justice, O God, we ask forgiveness.
For confusing love with lust.
And for pursuing fleeting pleasure at the cost of lasting hurt.
For using others as a means to gratify our desires.
And as stepping stones to further our ambitions.
For withholding love to control those we claim to love.
And shunning aside those whose youth or age disturbs us.
For hiding from others behind an armor of mistrust.
And for the cynicism which leads us to mistrust the reality of unselfish love.
Teach us to forgive ourselves for all these sins, O forgiving God, and help us to overcome them. As in your love, you have been patient with this people from the time you led us out of Egypt to the present day. So in your great love, may you forgive your people now.
Shema kolenu Adonai Eloheinu Shema kolenu Adonai Eloheinu Chus v'rachem aleinu V'kabel berachamim uvratzon et tefilatenu hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva Chadesh Yamenu kekedem Chadesh Yamenu kekedem Shema kolenu Adonai Eloheinu Shema kolenu Adonai Eloheinu.
Hear our voice, Adonai, our God. Have compassion upon us, and with that compassion, willingly accept our prayer. Cause us, Adonai, to return to you, and then we will return. Renew our days as of old. We turn to page 13 for Avinu Malkenu.
14.
14 for Avinu Malkenu. Avinu Malkenu Shema Kolenu.
Avinu Malkenu, hear our voice.
Avinu Malkenu Chatanu Lefanecha.
Avinu Malkenu, we have sinned before you.
Avinu Malkenu Chamol Aleinu Ve'al Olalenu Ve'tapenu.
Avinu Malkenu, have compassion upon us and upon our children and infants.
Avinu Malkenu Kalei Dever Ve'cherev Ve'ra'av Me'aleinu.
Avinu Malkenu, remove pestilence, sword, famine, and captivity.
Avinu Malkenu Kalei Kol Tsar U'mastin Me'aleinu.
Avinu Malkenu, rid us of every oppressor and adversary. Avinu Malkenu, kodvenu b'sefer chayim tovim.
Avinu Malkenu, inscribe us in the book of good life.
Avinu Malkenu, chadesh aleinu shana tova.
Avinu Malkenu, renew for us a good year.
Avinu Malkenu haram keren Yisrael amecha.
Avinu Malkenu, raise up the might of Israel, your people.
Avinu Malkenu cholnenu va'anenu ki ein banu ma'asim, aseh imanu tzedakah v'chesed v'hoshienu.
Avinu Malkenu, favor us and answer us, for we have no accomplishments. Deal with us charitably and kindly and deliver us.
Avinu Malkenu, Shema Koleinu. Avinu Malkenu, Chatanu Lefanecha. Avinu Malkenu, Chamol Aleinu, Ve'halol Aleinu, Ve'tapeinu. Avinu Malkenu, Kalet Lever, Ve'cherev Ve'rahav, Me'aleinu. Avinu Malkenu, Kalet Chotzar, U'mastin, Me'aleinu.
Avinu Malkenu,
Avinu Malkenu,
Malkenu,
Kadesh Aleinu, Shema Tova,
Avinu Malkenu, Avinu Malkenu, Avinu Malkenu, Chanenu v'hanenu, ki ein banu ma'asim. Aseh banu tzedakah v'chesed. Aseh tzedakah v'hoshienu. Aseh banu tzedakah v'chesed. Aseh banu tzedakah v'chesed v'hoshienu. Avinu Malkenu, Avinu Malkenu, Avinu Malkenu, Chanenu v'hanenu, ki ein banu ma'asim.
We turn now to Seder Kriyat Torah, to the Torah service. On Yom Kippur morning, we read from the end of the book of Deuteronomy, towards the end of it, the portion that challenges us all to accept our responsibility of community, that God spoke to all of us, those who were there right before they entered the promised land, and those who weren't, meaning the rest of us, future generations. The Willances are going to be chanting from the end of the portion. It can be found on page 15 in your Maksorim, your prayer books. Baruch hu et Adonai hamvorach, Baruch Adonai hamvorach leolam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Asher bachar banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et Torato, Baruch atah Adonai notein haTorah.
Ra'eh natati lefanecha chayom, et hachayim ve'et hatov ve'et hamavet ve'et harav, asher anochi mitzavecha hayom le'ahava et Adonai Elohecha lalechet biracha v'lishmor mitzvotav v'hukotav u'mishpatav v'chayita v'ravita uverachacha Adonai Elohecha ba'aretz asher tava shama l'rishta. Higati lachem hayom ki avod tuvedu lo tarichu yamim al ha'adama asher atah hover et hayardeh lavo shama l'rishta haidoti v'chem hayom et hashemayim v'et haaretz chachayim hamavet natati lefanecha habracha v'chachala uvacharta b'chayim l'ma'atihiyeh atah v'zarecha. See, I have set before you this day life and good, and death and evil, and that I command you this day to love the Lord your God, to walk in God's ways, and to keep God's commandments, statutes, and judgments, that you may live and multiply. And the Lord your God shall bless you in the land which you are entering to possess. I announce to you this day that you shall surely perish, and that you shall not prolong your days upon the land to which you are going over the Jordan to enter and possess. I call heaven and earth to record this day against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, that both you and your seed may live.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai notein haTorah. Oops. This is a bittersweet part of the service for us at Hakafa. Even weepy a little bit. The Haftarah for Yom Kippur morning was always something that Rabbi Marx wanted to do. It was his honor and his passion this particular portion from the prophets, Isaiah 58, that challenges us to act in the world as well as within our pews. So given that this is the first Yom Kippur since his leaving us, I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that and to send our love to him and to you, Ruth, if you're watching, and your family, and to all of us here at Hakafa. We miss him. The blessing before the Haftarah, page 16.
Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nviim tovim v'ratza b'devreihem hane'emarim be'emet Baruch atah Adonai haboker b'Torah uv'Moshe avdo uv'Yisrael amo uv'nviei ha'emet v'tzedek.
Kara v'garon al tachsoch kashofar harem kolecha v'haged le'ami pisham ulvet Yaakov chatatam. God says, cry with a full throat. Do not hold back. Let your voice resound like a shofar. Declare to my people their transgression, and to the house of Jacob their sin. Yes, they seek me daily as though eager to learn my ways, as if they were a people that does what is right and has not forsaken the way of God, of its God. Because on your fast day you pursue your own affairs while you oppress all your workers. Because your fasting leads only to strife and discord, while you strike with cruel fists. Such a way of fasting on this day will not help you to be heard on high. Is this the fast I have chosen, a day of self-affliction, bowing your head like a reed and covering yourself with sackcloth and ashes? Is this what you call a fast, a day acceptable to the eternal? Is not this the fast I have chosen, to unlock the shackles of injustice, to loosen the ropes of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, and to tear every yoke apart? Surely it is to share your bread with the hungry and bring the homeless poor into your house. When you see the naked, to cover them, never withdrawing yourself from your own kin. If you remove lawlessness from your midst, the pointing finger, the malicious word, if you give yourself to the hungry and satisfy the needs of the afflicted, then your light shall shine in the darkness, and your night become bright as noon. The Eternal One will guide you always, filling your throat in parched lands and renewing your body's strength. You shall be like a garden overflowing with water, like a spring that never fails. Some of you shall rebuild the ancient ruins, rebuilding the foundations of ages past. You shall be called repairer of the breach, restorer of streets to dwell in. Az titanag al Adonai, v'hirkavticha al bamotei aretz, v'ha'achalticha nachalat Yaakov avicha, ki pi Adonai diber.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam zor kol ha'alamim zadik b'kol hadorot ha'el ha'ne'eman v'homer v'oseh hamdaver u'mekayem shekol devarav emet v'tzedek al ha'torah v'al ha'avodah v'al hinvim v'ayom ha'kippurim hazeh shenatata lanu Adonai Eloheinu likavod ultiferet al hakol Adonai Eloheinu anaknu modim lak umvarkim otak yitbarak shemka b'fi kol ha'tamid le'olam va'ed uvarka emet v'kayam la'ad baruch atah Adonai melech mochel v'soleach la'avonotenu v'la'avonot amo beit Yisrael avir ashniv motenu v'kol shana v'shana melech al kol ha'aretz mekadesh Yisrael v'yom ha'kippurim.
Amen.
Good morning. Forgiveness, it has been said, means giving up our hope for a better past. On this Day of Atonement, may we abandon that hope and instead continue the journey along the path of moral and spiritual purification, finding our way from unconsciousness to awareness. This journey allows us to open our hearts so that we may create a bridge to our own ethical and spiritual condition. May our souls abound with compassion, forgiveness, and loving connectedness. May we be the blessing, the renewal.
Anachnu va'avotenu chatanu. We and our ancestors have sinned. Ashamnu. We have trespassed. But God knew. We have betrayed. Many Jews will pound their chests as part of the Yom Kippur prayers to awaken their hearts to teshuvah. Rabbi Robert Marx, Zichrono Livracha, gave me my first taste of Judaism. As a little girl, I remember his booming voice drawing people into the big room, as it was called, for services on Sunday mornings. Through his teachings, I equated Judaism with social justice and almost nothing else. Sure, I knew the Torah was a pretty big deal, but sorting donations at the Nutrier food pantry or serving dinner at the Good News soup kitchen, now that was Judaism, and that was Torah. What more did I need to know? There's a famous photo of the beloved scholar, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, marching across the Pettus Bridge with a Torah in his arms, alongside Martin Luther King Jr. I used to point to Rabbi Heschel and confuse his white beard and wise face with Rabbi Marx's, telling anyone who would listen, "Look, that's my rabbi." As a teen, I was embarrassed to find out that I'd been mixing up the two of them for years. But that photo was central to my understanding of Jewishness. Like my very own rabbi was joining hands with Martin Luther King Jr. and personifying radical change for future generations to see. I later learned that Rabbi Marx did, in fact, march with Dr. King during a 1966 protest where he was pelted with rocks. I was so proud of the Jewish community. After all, we too were strangers in Egypt. And our community has done truly incredible work in alliance with the American civil rights movement. That is true, and that is real. The photo of Rabbi Heschel circulated quite a lot last year during the George Floyd summer uprisings. Many people posted the photo on their social media accounts to send the reminder that we as Jews had done this work before, and it's work that we are proud of and committed to doing again. That pride is a legacy that underlies my own values as a Jew, as a woman, as an American. But as summer 2020 rolled into fall and then winter, and Jewish friends' social media accounts slowly began to forget the words, "I can't breathe," or Breonna Taylor's face, I began to wonder, how long will we depend on this famous photo of Rabbi Heschel and Dr. King to do the work for us? How long will we as Jews hide behind this photo as if it were our own personal contribution to social justice? How long will each of us continue standing idle and mute on the issues of racism within our own Jewish community? As Jews, we can attest to the importance of allies and the pursuit of justice and upholding humanity. We can attest to the deep pain that results from walking the path of the righteous alone. We can attest to how exhausting it is to consistently struggle to affirm what should be a simple truth. Each individual in the sea of humanity has inherent value. But can we attest to truly hearing, truly seeing, and truly acknowledging the voices of Jews of color? Pashanu. We have been negligent in our performance of the commandments. Last month, I completed a fellowship with Trua, a human rights organization for clergy. I became close with Sarah, a Jew of color who, like me, attends Hebrew Union College for rabbinical school. Sarah carried within her the scars of deeply painful experiences inflicted on her by the Jewish community. At a Hebrew Union College dinner, as Sarah was about to leave, she paused next to the buffet table to check her phone briefly. A passing lady said to her, "You can take my plate, I'm done," and tossed the dirty plate into Sarah's hands. The attendee thought Sarah was a dining staff worker because to this woman, Sarah didn't look Jewish. Sarah told me that this was not the first time something like this had happened to her within a Jewish space. It continues to make her feel like an outsider within her own people, even as she studies to become a rabbi. Even as the Jewish community marches in support of Black lives or immigration reform or against Asian hate. Even as the Jewish community posts signs in our synagogues or on social media reminding V'ahavta l'recha kamocha, love thy neighbor as thyself. And even as Jewish people plant signs on their front lawns declaring their home a safe space for all people. In anguish, Sarah asked me, "What more do I have to do? I wear a Star of David around my neck every day. I have a Hebrew name. I've become a bat mitzvah. I've been confirmed. I pray every day, and I'm becoming a rabbi. When will I be accepted by my own community?" How many of us think of Jewishness as the color white? How many of us think of the organized Jewish world as the color white? Many of us react immediately to Sarah's story with shock or sadness or embarrassment, followed by, "What a rude person to have said that to her," or "I would never do something like that," or even, "That would never happen in our community." But isn't that the exact kind of thinking that Yom Kippur implores us to reconsider? Our Yom Kippur Vidui, the prayer of confession that is repeated multiple times throughout the Day of Atonement, is written in the collective. It is not just my ancestors who have sinned, it is our ancestors who have sinned. It is not just that I have been negligent, it is that we have been negligent. We pray as a collective, and by praying as a collective, we are reminded that each of our transgressions are bound to each other. When one of us misses the mark, we as the Jewish people all miss the mark. Yes, it is frustrating, and yes, that might sound like a torturous group project, but this is our main task as Jews. And one major oversight on all of our parts is how we may be, intentionally or unintentionally, silencing, rejecting, or making our community harder to access for Jews of color. Ta'inu. We have gone astray. Our liturgy teaches us to be thankful. In our morning blessings, we thank God for such things as our senses, our bodies, and even our freedom. And this, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, matir asurim. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who frees the captive. Again, I am comforted and proud of our tradition. Our texts are crying out to us, saying, look, the Jewish people stand for freedom, for liberation, for anti-slavery and anti-racism. It is woven into the fabric of our people's history and liturgy. But then I discover again that our community is not always on the same page. Collectively, again, we have missed the mark. In a 17th century Jewish prayer book from Amsterdam, as well as several other prayer books from this time period, you can find, not too far from our morning prayer thanking God for freeing the captive, a Hebrew prayer to recite upon purchasing a slave. This prayer reads, "Merciful One, have mercy. Master of this slave, remember to rejoice in his labor and to work him and his sons after him. As it says, you shall pass them on as an inheritance to your sons, as an eternal inheritance. You shall work through them. Blessed are you, the good one who does good." What do we do with that? How could this have been part of our liturgy? How could we have thanked God for freeing us from bondage and then a few pages later thanked God for enslaving another person and his family? Did we learn nothing in Egypt? We created a division of us versus them. We collectively missed the mark. Many of us, quite understandably, feel defensive after learning about this prayer celebrating enslavement. But we must restrain that defensive response. That is the first step in our work of teshuvah, in our work of becoming anti-racists. If we begin to think, but that was in Europe, not here in America, we again miss the mark. When the early American colonies needed human capital, Jews joined the colonization efforts by the dozens, relieved to feel needed and, for once, less of an underdog. Black people became the new minority, and our silence during this period tells us that perhaps we were just relieved that finally we weren't the ones with targets on our backs. About the time the American Civil War began, a famous exchange occurred between Rabbi Isaac Mayer Wise in the North, the creator of the Union Prayer Book, and Rabbi David Einhorn, a prominent rabbi in the South. They disagreed about whether slavery was morally permissible. Rabbi Wise found slavery to be vexing, more an annoyance than a moral issue. He accepted slavery in states where it already existed, and he never addressed politics from his bima. He even used excerpts from the Torah to justify owning black slaves. Rabbi Einhorn, on the other hand, condemned using the Torah to permit slavery and argued that the holiness of our teachings would be undermined if slave ownership continued in our country. Unfortunately, at this time, Rabbi Einhorn was in the minority of rabbis who were vocal about this invidious injustice. These two rabbis were not the only ones uncertain about slave ownership. Reform rabbis across the country, from the north to the south, were divided on this issue. This, too, is part of our American Jewish story. We cannot divorce ourselves from it, as ugly as it is. Our Jewish communities thanked God for acquiring slaves, not just in the 17th century, but in the fabric of American history. We all missed the mark. Maradnu. We have rebelled against God and Torah. 17% of American Jews identify as racially diverse. 8% of American Jews identify as Jews of color. These are not insignificant numbers, but they are all too often overlooked by our Jewish communities. It's time we make space for them and focus on changing the notion that whiteness is integral to Jewishness. Because you can bet that if you met any of our biblical ancestors, they surely would not share my complexion. A few summers ago, I spent some time in New York studying in a progressive egalitarian yeshiva. One day, after returning from a lunch break that ran a bit too long, the other students and I dashed back inside the yeshiva building as we were all late for afternoon tefillah. One at a time, we entered the sanctuary, passing the facilitating community members who greeted us with a smile, until it was our friend Ezra's turn. Ezra with his talit bag under his arm. Ezra with his chai earring. Ezra with his Golda Meir t-shirt. Ezra with his black skin. The man said to Ezra, "Do you need help finding something? This is the sanctuary." Again, I ask, what do we do with this? When was it decided which types of Jews get the privilege of policing other Jews? When did our community decide who gets to be welcomed in and who gets to be questioned out? The poison of racism is clear as day out there in the streets of our country. But the poison is also here within us. We have all missed the mark. In anti-racism training, one of the most common missteps white identifying people make is defending ourselves or feeling the need to explain or justify our mistakes. Yom Kippur, like anti-racism workshops, asks us to acknowledge that we are part of the problem. Acknowledge our role within the issue, even if the offense wasn't committed by our own hand or intentionally. And acknowledge it's incumbent upon us to move into a space of accountability and real change without getting defensive. Yes, Rabbi Heschel marched with Dr. King across the Pettus Bridge. Yes, the Jewish people have been strong allies for people of color in many groundbreaking movements over the course of our country's history. Yes, many of us, even in this room or watching online, took to the streets last summer to join the outcry and the uprisings. And yes, we have all transgressed. We have all blinded ourselves to the colors of our own Jewish community. We have all reassured ourselves that the real problem is out there, not in here. We have all ignored the sound of the shofar when it has asked us to open our eyes and see what is right in front of us here in our own Jewish communities. We are not innocent. We as a Jewish community must hold each other accountable for our words, for our actions, and for our omissions. We can start this work right at home within our own Jewish backyard with creating spaces for and uplifting the voices of Jews of color or Jews who don't fit the assumed Ashkenormative profile. We are all in different places along this journey of confronting racism in our own lives. I have made many, many, many mistakes along my path of unlearning. But it is in the return, the teshuvah of this work, that we grow. When we start to truly hear the sound of the shofar, when we begin to explore and grapple with our own relationships with racism and Judaism, when we truly value the voices, thoughts, and contributions of Jews of color within our communities, when we realize this is our collective work to do, our Jewish family will move closer to living the words of the Torah and not just reading them. In the name of Sarah, in the name of Ezra, and in the name of so many Jews of color whose identities have been disregarded and questioned by their very own people, I ask us all to take a cheshbon hanefesh, an accounting of our souls this Yom Kippur, acknowledging that while we may have done some of this important work, we have also gone astray, and that it's not only possible, but necessary that we find our way back again. Shana Tova.
Nitzol shoni mira usvatai midaber mira v'liktalachlai nafshi tidom v'nafshi ke'afar l'kol tehiyeh Elohai Elohai nitzol shoni mira V'tai midaber mima V'yitalachai nafshi tidom V'nafshi ke'afar l'kol tehiyeh Elohai 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 nitzol shoni mira V'tai midaber mima V'yitalachai V'nafshi ke'afar l'kol tehiyeh Elohai Elohai B'tach libi
We continue immediately with study on Zoom and continue through the afternoon. Thank you. Thank you to our choir, too. Thanks so much.